Senior figure, and 2 points from his talk stood out for me. First, this is the most dangerous moment, he said, in world history since 1962. That's when the U.S. and the Soviet Union.
I just restarted the app.
And again, now, we are confronted by arrogant great power confrontations and the danger of nuclear annihilation. Dr. Gromyko's other point, which we don't need to love, but do need to respect, helps to explain the urgency of today's crisis. Victory in the Ukraine war is, he said, and I quote, a key national security interest of Russia, and that, quoting again, no nuclear power can accept losing a military conflict. The greatest danger we would face now would be if Kiev threatened Moscow's hold on Crimea, home to Moscow's Black Sea Fleet for 3 centuries. That danger is mitigated a little bit by the stalemate and by the, if you will, the apparent failure of Kiev's counter-offensive. But as one Russian general said in a Track 2 exchange, if Crimea is threatened, all bets are off. He said all bets are off in terms of Russian resort to its nuclear arsenal. The annexation of Crimea in 2014 violated the UN Charter, but it was consistent with Russian history, with the empire's perceived essential vital interest, and with popular support of the Russian-identified majority there. 60 years ago, President Kennedy was right when he advised that while defending our own vital interests, nuclear powers must avert those confrontations which will bring an adversary to a choice of either humiliating retreat or nuclear war. To adopt that kind of course, he said, in the nuclear age would be evidence only of bankruptcy of our policy and of a collective death wish for the world. We need to understand it's that dangerous. Regardless of right or wrong,
but I think you should make the
regardless
banner
of
more back
NATO's
to
reckless expansion to Russia's borders, the EU's insistence on that Kiev sever its economic ties with Moscow in order to join the European Union, and regardless of Putin's brutal imperial invasion of Ukraine, the reality is that time is not on Ukraine's side. We can talk about that later. Even as Tom Friedman wrote in the New York Times in the earliest days of the war, whether we like it or not, it can only end with a dirty deal. Which brings us to June's International Peace Summit in Vienna and the urgent need for a ceasefire and negotiations. I was there. With more than 300 people from 32 countries, primarily from Europe, but also from the Global South, we were blessed with the courageous presence of Russian and Ukrainian peace advocates. We certainly had our differences. Not least were those between the Italian labor and religious leaders who have organized the largest peace rallies to date and who played a major role in organizing the Vienna Peace Summit. They and others wanted to limit demands to a ceasefire and negotiations. On the other side was the Peace in Ukraine Coalition representative and others who initially insisted that the summit's call include condemnation of NATO imperialism and rejection of all arms transfers to Ukraine. There was easy unity in condemning Russia's invasion, and in friendly conversation fueled by the desperate appeal to stop the devastation from Ukrainian and other delegates, and by the need for movement unity, conference organized unified around our call: ceasefire, negotiations, and this week's International Days of Action. 2 poignant memories persist. First was the shock that pressure from the Ukrainian government on the Austrian labor union that hosted the summit led to the cancellation of the conference site just 2 days before we 300 people from 32 countries descended on Vienna. Kiev wanted to prevent the summit from happening, and that should tell us something about Ukraine's commitment to democracy. Second was an excellent speech by the former U.S. colonel and diplomat Ann Wright. She cut through the rhetoric and the criticisms that ceasefire will leave Russian aggression in place. She reminded those assembled that it took more than 500 meetings to achieve the now 70-year-old Korean armistice. In that light, she stressed, we have the urgent need for negotiations to begin the progress toward a ceasefire now. Before the war began, my hope was that diplomacy would prevent and result in a neutral, non-NATO Ukraine whose sovereignty would be credibly guaranteed, perhaps by the United Nations. That possibility was discussed in Track 2 diplomatic sessions and is still my hope. I also believe that it is in Ukraine's interest to discard its 10-point so-called peace demands. Crimea will not be returned to Ukraine. We may not like it, but that's reality. This war is stalemated, and the sacrifice of thousands of Ukrainian warriors' lives to regain just a few villages is a fool's errand that risks vertical and geographic escalation of the war. The longer it goes on, the more dangerous it becomes. General Milley warned that neither side can win this war militarily. Now, with its infinitely smaller economic, military production economic and military production capacity, and its much smaller population, compounded by millions of its refugees now across Europe who will never return, and with its diminishing international support for a costly and endless war, it is in Ukraine's interest, as well as ours, to press our leaders to begin pressing for ceasefire and negotiations. The truth is that Zelensky does face threats to his rule and maybe even his life if he reduces his demands. This underscores the need for Biden to stop allowing the Ukrainian tail from wagging the American dog. Biden should give Zelensky cover by insisting on negotiations and a ceasefire now. Biden should be declaring that it's time for negotiations between Ukraine and Russia, between Russia and NATO, and between the United States and Russia. Friends, this is not going to be easy, but it must be done, and we can help make it happen. The Minsk Accords and the still secret Istanbul text are dead letters. Pax Americana, as Fiona Hill said, is over. War's speed history, and Russia's invasion of Ukraine has crystallized the post-Cold War emergence of a new multipolar disorder. It is in our interest, in Ukraine's and the world's, to press the United States to demand a ceasefire, to move to negotiations, and we desperately need to adjust our policies to the reality of the new multipolar world. Thank you, and struggle.
Thank you, Joe, for laying out right before us what's at stake here. Let us take those words to heart. Next, we're very fortunate to have Nina Giulianini perform a few pieces of music for us. Nina is from Holliston. She's a recent graduate of the great Boston College. Please welcome Nina.
Hello. All right. Perfect. Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us. Above us only sky. Imagine all the people living for today. Imagine there's no countries. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for. No religion too. Imagine how the people living life in peace. You may say I'm a dreamer. but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will live as one. Imagine no possessions. I wonder if you can. No need for greed or hunger. A brotherhood of man. Imagine all the people wearing all the world. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will live as one.
All right, if Ben wants to come up, he can join me on this is, what is it? Blowing in the Wind. Modified.
How many roads must a man walk down before you call him a man? How many seas do Agda sail before she sleeps in the sand? Yes, and how many times must the cluster bombs fly before they are forever banned? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. Yes, and how many times must a man turn his head and pretend that he just doesn't see? And how many bombs can the people withstand before they're allowed to be free? Yes, and how many months can the innocent flee before they're allowed to come home? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. How many wars must we wage on the world before we find another way? And how many ears must one man have before he can hear the people cry? And how many deaths will it take till he knows that too many people have died? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nina. That was beautiful. Okay, our next speaker is Chris Chanyasulkit. Chris is president of the American Public Health Association, and she is here to give her thoughts on this dangerous situation that we face. Chris, thank you so much. Really appreciate you being with us today.
Thank you. So I don't know how to follow the beauty of that music. Thank you so much. But I won't sing for you because that wouldn't be good. Hello, my name is Chris, and I am president of the American Public Health Association, APHA. For all of those who don't know, APHA has been around for 150 years, working to influence policy all across our nation for better health. We were there looking at affordable health care, and we are still here trying to support that. But I'm here today to say APHA also saw last year and said it, but we'll say it again. We unequivocally and completely condemn this war. APHA sees that it is not just the health and well-being of those in Ukraine, but all across our precious planet is being harmed by this invasion of Ukraine. It's unjust, it's immoral. And again, though APHA believes that, I also want you to know that we have lots of evidence-based research that you know perhaps better than I do on the detrimental health impacts of war, on those who are waging it, on those who are terrorized by it, on the public health practitioners and those soldiers and just everyone everywhere. We are feeling the effects of this, whether it's famine in other places far from Ukraine. So I ask, and the APHA asks you to not only condemn it, but I'm asking you to vote for health. I've been all across this nation, from Alaska to most recently Virginia, and now here. And I truly believe the only way we will end this and get our priorities right-sided for health is by voting. Up and down the elections, in your local elections here, in your city council, in your town meeting, at your state, right here, your state house, and across the nation, I ask you to vote. We saw in the pandemic what happens when those health boards and school committees and all of those are just filled by folks who don't have health as a priority for them, because I know, we know, it's health in all policies. Health is always on the ballot. We know that transportation is health. Having access to quality, reliable, safe transportation. It's not lost on me also that I'm standing in front of the TV. We need this. You know, dare I say, I would love to have free fares. I think that would be a game changer for so many communities. We at APHA know that climate change is health, and therefore we know that the policies that are made at your local level for zoning, at your state level, as well as at your national level, affect climate change. And we, especially those far and near, are feeling these effects of climate change. Climate change is real, it is happening, and in particular is hurting those already vulnerable populations, low-income communities all across the nation. And we need to put our money, our priorities, our heart, our effort into all of these. We need to put it again into transportation, into climate change, into reproductive justice. We need stronger gun control laws. All of these things we need to work. And that's where we need to put our money and time into it and stop these senseless, immoral wars. And I really believe, and I think we can do it, if we get all voters to vote, eligible voters, and get out the vote and register those voters, and we vote. The research has shown that our elected officials at all levels are not making policy the way the majority of us all feel. So if we want to end this war, if we want to tackle climate change, if we want to provide affordable housing for folks, if we want living wages and reproductive justice. And if we want to make sure everyone everywhere recognizes that abortion is health care, then I call on all of you to join us at APHA to vote for health. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you for being with us. And thank you for your message to us. Next, we're going to bring Ben Grosscup back up here to do a little different type of song that I think you might enjoy. While Ben is singing, I'm going to be giving out the song sheets to the various songs that he's doing today in the hope that if you recognize any of these songs, you will sing along with Ben. On this next one, though, you probably haven't heard it yet. So, Ben Grosscup. Please come up again.
Thank you so much, Paul. Maybe we'll pass those lyric sheets out when I come back up in a little bit. But this song is called Uncle Sam Sees a Shrink. And I wrote this song really trying to engage with, why does the government make the crazy foreign policy decisions that it makes? What is it in the psychology of our country that leads our leaders in this country to consistently do the same thing over and over again and be unable to engage with the realities of a changing multipolar world? So, I don't know if any of you have ever been to a therapist. Have you? I feel like Uncle Sam needs to see a therapist too, that it could be really helpful. Anyway, this is called Uncle Sam Sees a Shrink. So what brought me here, shrink, is I started to think that perhaps I've gone into decline. I almost forget when the sun never set on countries whose rules I define. My unrivaled power meant nations would cower and help my vast wealth to accrue. If one wasn't supine or they got out of line, well, I'd just take them out in a coup. And I have by far the best nuclear warheads. Each one is on trigger alert. My hundreds of foreign bases are spread to maintain the control I exert. So doctor, help me, I can't understand why wielding this power feels pointless and bland. Even with all my arms, my wealth and grandeur, I still feel so insecure. And be frank with me, please. I'm down on my knees. Your words come with weighty credentials. Why am I in this pain? Can you help me regain the status of being essential? It just makes me irate when erstwhile client states demand that I honor their borders. I feel anxious and sick. Check the diagnostic manual of mental disorders. Hey doctor, what's the assessment at which you've arrived? And where's it described in this text? Well, I'm paging up there right now in the DSM-5 for, what's that section called again? The military industrial complex? Says the symptoms are fraudsters and hacks win the biggest contracts, building jet fighters and drones. Economies go down in the cities and towns once lenders start calling in loans. Doc, my global franchise runs on free enterprise. You're missing my problem's causation. Just help me to see all the threats facing me, like the meddling done by foreign nations? Or do you mean to imply that the very armed forces, key to the power I've known, empty me of my best resources and cause me to feel so alone? My consultants attested that you were the best, but I clearly see now you're a phony. I pay you too well to be left in this hell of the stress that comes with hegemony. This session has only made me feel more ill and thrown your prestige into doubt. You should have known I'm a shining city on a hill. We're done now and I'm walking out. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ben. And are there any psychotherapists out there that can help Uncle Sam out here? Okay, here's one over here. Ben, right there. Go see her. She can help you. Okay, our next speaker is Reverend Christopher Ney from Newburyport. Christopher is with the Fellowship of Reconciliation and the War Resisters League. Please welcome Reverend Christopher Ney. Thank you for being with us, Chris.
Thank you so much. I'm a pastor, not a psychotherapist, but maybe I can offer some help or inspiration for our efforts here today. A little over 100 years ago, as all of Europe was on the precipice of war, two courageous, creative people of faith, people of conscience, stood on a train platform and shook hands, saying goodbye to each other. They had just been at a peace conference in Amsterdam among folks who were concerned about the outbreak of war that was upon the continent. And it was not a very large group, maybe not much bigger than those who are here today. But those two people who went away from that conference, a Quaker from England and a Lutheran pastor from Germany, shook hands, and in that handshake they pledged, no matter what our governments decide to do, you and I will never hurt each other. That was the foundation of Fellowship of Reconciliation, now a global movement for reconciliation, justice, and peace, and the oldest interfaith peace organization in the United States. My name is Chris Nye. I am privileged to be with you this day representing FOR as co-chair of its National Council. Inspired by those actions 100 years ago and by the creative courage of soldiers in the trenches at Christmas time during that First World War, FOR this year called for a Christmas truce, ceasefire in the war between Russia and Ukraine. The call for that Christmas truce back in December was endorsed by more than 1,000 religious and community leaders all across the country, including Reverend Harris and Reverend Theo Harris and Barber, the head of the Poor People's Campaign, recognizing that money spent on war will not go to educate, feed, clothe, and house our own people. It was a sign that there is hunger in this country for peace, even though we are constantly told that there are only two options: more military aid to Ukraine or capitulation to Russian aggression. But we know, as people of conscience, people who have the creativity to be courageous, that there are always other options. And there are always people like us, though small in number but mighty, who are also looking for alternatives to war to break the endless cycle of violence. And one of the ways that we can show our support is by standing in support of war resistors and conscientious objectors, both in Russia and in Ukraine. Russia has fiercely persecuted those who have resisted the draft, expelling many from their country. And sadly, the Biden administration is undergoing efforts right now to deport Russian resistors who have sought sanctuary within the United States. So one thing that we can do is call upon the Biden administration to provide asylum to those Russians who don't want to fight, to have a place where they can be safe here in the U.S. The other thing that's happening is that the Ukrainian government is going after the pacifist movement within Ukraine. And Yuri Shevchenko, who's been a leader of the Ukrainian pacifist movement, is currently under house arrest for his creativity, his courage, his outspokenness for peace. He has a court date coming up on Tuesday of this week. And so another thing that we can do is write directly to President Zelensky and urging him to allow Yuri to do his work of spreading the word of peace without interference from the government. So you can send an email to letter@apu.gov.ua encouraging President Zelensky to drop all charges against Yuri Shevchenko. We are a small group, but amazing things happen when small people have creativity and courage and the determination to break the cycle of violence and to work for reconciliation and for peace. That's why I'm here. That's why you're here. That's why together we are continuing this work of reconciliation, nonviolence, and peace. God bless you. Take good care.
Well, thank you so much, Chris. And let's not forget Yuri, because the United States is in an excellent position to tell the Ukrainian regime to free this conscientious objector. So let's not forget Yuri for the reasons that Chris gave us. Our next speaker is from that great organization, the Watertown Citizens for Peace, Justice, and the Environment. Now, here is a group that decided to take on everything at once. And speaking for them today, we appreciate Tony Palumba joining us. Tony?
Thank you very much. It's wonderful to be here. I want to thank the other speakers and the musicians for being, and I especially want to thank you all for joining our voices in the call from Vienna for a week of global mobilizations for immediate ceasefire and peace negotiations. I don't tell you how great it feels to be among people who recognize that the only way we are going to end this war is through diplomacy. Thank you all for being here. I've been asked to speak for a few minutes on the twin threats, existential threats of climate change and nuclear exchange. It would be very hard to deny, though there are still people who do, that we are experiencing climate change now. It is not something that will happen in the future when we reach a certain number. It is now on a global scale, as we see an increased wildfires in California and Canada, the heat waves in India, Italy, and the southwest of the U.S., the droughts in parts of Africa, the floods in Libya. The United Nations IPCC continues to warn us with every new report that climate change will only continue unabated if we do not limit and decrease emissions. There are those of us who recognize life will not be the same. Just an example is recently 200 medical editors of 200 medical journals penned an unprecedented statement to say that the most pressing public health crisis is climate change. They went on to say that unless we cut heat-trapping emissions, the catastrophic harm to our health will be irreversible. And what about the twin of the climate change, the existential possibility of a nuclear exchange? Never has the threat of a catastrophic nuclear event through the use of battlefield weapons or accidents been greater. With all but one of the arms control agreements between the US and Russia remaining, with the growing tension between China and the United States, and with the increased development of nuclear capability of North Korea, a nuclear exchange that can escalate to nuclear war is possible. In addition, the nuclear arms race will continue as the U.S. embarks on $2 trillion program to modernize our nuclear triad over the next decade. Surely to follow will be Chinese and Russian efforts to continue to modernize their own weapons. The development of this leads to the scientists at the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists to move the hands of the doomsday clock to 90 seconds before midnight. Enter the Ukraine war, where the twin threats are real. The ecological devastation in Ukraine and the possibility of a nuclear accident at one of the 4 nuclear plants and its 15 reactors is real. The most direct link to increased climate change is the results of the sabotage of the Nord pipeline, which has led European countries to resort to coal and oil to produce the energy they need. Thus, more emissions at a time when reduction in emissions is paramount. Then where is the threat? And then there is the threat, veiled may it be, that the Russians could use battlefield nuclear weapons to forestall of Ukraine victory. There is little doubt that the use of a nuclear weapon on one side will lead to the use of a nuclear weapon on the other. There are those who say we can conduct a limited nuclear war. But even now we know that a limited nuclear war could cause enormous climate disruptions and widespread famine. Are we willing to risk this to test the viability of a limited nuclear war? I don't think so. So what is the answer to the twin existential threats? It is clear we must have a dramatic reduction in CO2 emissions and increase the use of our wind and solar as sources of energy to cool our homes and our businesses and electrify our cars and trucks. We must support those groups who on the local, regional, national, and international level who call for a reduction in climate and CO2 emissions. And we must demand nuclear disarmament and support Representative McGovern's Res 77, which is based on the PSR's Back to the Brink campaign. And we must call for the abolition of nuclear weapons, as called for by Representative Eleanor Holmes' bill, which is spearheaded by Nuclear Ban US in its Wars to Windmills campaign. The war in Ukraine offers us the opportunity to demonstrate how negotiations and diplomacy can be used to end the death and destruction. It can also offer us a model for addressing the twin existential threats of climate change and nuclear exchange. But most of all, we must build alliances between activists and climate activists and nuclear disarmament activists, as well as those showing us how U.S. imperialism, U.S. militarism perpetuates the climate crisis. And now I want to be clear that the Ukraine war must stop and can only stop through ceasefire and negotiations. I leave you with 4 words that are a symbolic call for these alliances. And I ask you to join me in this chant. No war, no warming. No war, no warming. No war, no warming. No war, no warming. Thank you.
Maybe before then. I just wasn't around then. We are very, very fortunate to have our next speaker with us today, who's on a very busy schedule, but she decided to come by and join us for this rally for peace in Ukraine. I want to introduce Representative Erika Uyerhoeven, who represents my city of Somerville. And just to say that we are very fortunate to have someone in the State House like Representative Uyerhoeven, because here is someone who deals not just with local issues, not just with national issues, but with international issues. And there aren't too many elected officials that fit into that category. Please welcome Erika and express our thanks for all she does for us. Erika.
Thank you all so much. Good afternoon. It's really just an honor to be here because, and it was important for me to be here because for me, this global movement for us to stand up and call for peace is one that is rooted in our love for all of humanity and all of the world that we want to believe and build. It is rooted in our love for Ukrainian people who are facing senseless violence, murder, systemic rape, all of the horrors of war and being the victims of an imperialistic strategy. We're also here for our love of the people of Russia who live under an autocratic regime that is run by their ruling class that oppresses their people through extreme inequality, extreme political suppression, and many of these wonderful, beautiful activists across the globe and in Russia notably face these incredible threats to violence in their own bodily humanity. We're also here for all of our love of all of the people who are impacted by the food crisis, the famine, the threats to all of our food systems that have been perpetuated by this war, and our love for any person in the countless environmental justice communities across the globe that are impacted by the threats of climate change and this ongoing war, as well as anyone who is a threat to the dangers of nuclear war breaking out, which is really all of us. And that is the shared humanity that we are here and we stand here for our love for all people today. And that means really it's something very personal to me because I'm a Japanese American. I grew up here in the US. My mother immigrated from Japan. And so my entire life I've had to navigate that hyphen between Japanese American, Asian American, and what a professor, who posthumously my teacher, from reading his works, Howard Zinn talks about how war poisons all. And I've seen that firsthand in my upbringing and my life, whether it's the racial discrimination and hatred towards Japanese Americans passed down generations of why we were the bad side that needed to be fought, as well as thinking about the generational trauma in my own family. My grandfather fought in the Imperial Army in Japan. He went to China and caused senseless violence, and then brought that home and brought that into the household. So that's what we mean by the war poisons all, right? And I wanted to bring that because Professor Zinn brings about, the way he talks about peace and justice and this movement is about his experience as a bombardier in World War II. And I think in many ways, each and every one of us have that personal story and connection to why this is so critical and why we understand why this is so important for our shared humanity. I also want to just state too that this means so much to me to stand here with you all as a young activist. I think of generational trauma, and I also think about generational movements. And I know many people I've had the opportunity to get to know and understand and why they got involved in mass peace action or peace movements across the globe. A lot of us have a shared experience, and particularly I want to honor people who first got politicized through the Vietnam War and got politicized through trying to stop it and saw firsthand the consequences for standing up for peace and the consequences for standing up against imperialism. And I share that because for myself, my first political moment or politicization in my life was the Iraq War. I grew up, I was in high school at the time, and I remember I didn't have the language for it at the time. I was just a high school student, but it just didn't make sense. Like, why are we going to war in Iraq? And for most of my life, sadly, we have been at war as a country, right? Participating in all of these wars without pause. And so for me, I also just want to honor this sort of generational movement that I really deeply, I didn't know it at the time when I was in high school, but I very much stood on the shoulders of all of you who stood up against injustices in Vietnam and previous injustices of our, the imperial acts of our government. And I just really want to honor that and thank that, because then I wouldn't be where I am today without each and every one of you. And that's why we continue this struggle and we stand here today. It was so important to be here and to be part of this global movement that is calling for peace and calling for justice and calling for, while it's never the easiest thing, but not succumbing ourselves to that poison and succumbing ourselves to the ugly underbelly of fight more with more. And what we know is going to result in that is the destruction of us all. And that is a real threat that people have had to reckon with and deal with and see the physical consequences of, that we refuse to participate in. So I just really want to thank you all so much for being part of this movement. It's truly an honor to stand here with you all and to call for diplomatic solutions, call for ceasefire. And we know that in our past, this is not a new idea. This is something that in previous difficult and precarious moments of our nation's history, whether it's the Cuban Missile Crisis or others, that it was ceasefire, it was negotiations that got us to a solution, not listening to the hawks. And that's what we're calling for today. And I want to say thank you all so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Erika, for those words and for spending your time with us today on this Saturday. Now we're going to have Ben Grosscup do a few more songs. I told you earlier I was going to hand out the song sheets, but I lied. In fact, now Susan is going to hand out those song sheets because I think you will want to follow the words. And if you know any of these songs, to sing along with it. But so please grab one of these song sheets. I think you'll want to take it home with you today anyway, because these are songs that you won't find anywhere else. Okay, Ben, take it away.
Thank you so much, Paul. Yeah, so the first song we're going to do is number 4 on that lyric sheet. So just scroll up to number 4. It's called We Say NATO's Got to Go. This song is actually using a melody called Joshua Fit the Battle of Jericho, which is a traditional African-American spiritual. But the words are all new. I've first heard Charlie King sing, "We say the drones have got to go, because we're talking about drone warfare. But in this case, NATO, because the central political issue at the heart of this war in Ukraine is the issue of NATO expansion. NATO is the extension of U.S. foreign policy to Western Europe and beyond Western Europe, frankly. It's a reordering of the global system under the leadership of U.S. imperialism. And it's been the contention of our leaders in this country to constantly expand that domain of political influence throughout Western Europe. And this is considered intolerable by other major global powers. And the inability of our ruling class to contend with that basic reality is why they have continued to push this war. And if you will join me on singing We Say NATO's Got to Go so the people can live in peace. Again, it's number 4 on the lyric sheet. Kosovo to Afghanistan to Libya and Ukraine. The bureaucrats of NATO bring endless war and pain. They say they want a victory, so they're sending in more arms. But nuclear Armageddon doesn't seem to raise alarm. We say NATO's got to go, got to go, got to go. We say NATO's got to go so the people can live in peace. We say NATO, we say NATO's got to go, got to go, got to go. We say NATO's got to go so the people can live in peace. Raytheon and Lockheed make the weapons used to kill. NATO members buy them, and the people pay the bill. We can't afford good housing. We can't afford health care. We can't afford clean water, 'cause NATO left us bare. We say NATO's got to go, got to go, got to go. We say NATO's got to go so the people can live in peace. We say NATO's got to go, got to go, got to go. We say NATO's got to go so the people can live in peace. Washington made NATO to enforce its global rule. Now it's bombing pipelines where allies once got fuel. NATO domination brings hunger, war, and fear. But there's cracks in the foundation, and NATO's end is near. Remember what happened at Jericho? The trumpets began to sound. Joshua commanded the people to shout, and the walls came tumbling down. Here we go. We say NATO's got to go, got to go, got to go. We say NATO's got to go so the people can live in peace. One more time. We say NATO's got to go, got to go, got to go. We say NATO's got to go so the people can live in peace. A cappella. We say NATO's got to go, got to go, got to go. We say NATO's got to go so the people can live in peace. Thank you. Thank you so much. Turn to number 1 on your lyric sheet. Reverend Vernon said it, Vernon Walker said earlier, study war no more. And this is a classic song. We need to study war no more. I want to hear your voices on this one. I'm gonna lay down my sword and shield down by the riverside. Down by the riverside, down by the riverside, I'm gonna lay down my sword and shield. Down by the riverside, study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. I'm gonna lay down that atom bomb down by the riverside, way down. Way down by the riverside. I'm gonna lay down that atom bomb way down by the riverside. Study war war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. I'm gonna lay down that M1 tank way down. Way down. Down by the riverside, I'm gonna lay down that M1 tank way down. By the riverside. Study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. I'm gonna lay down that F-16 down by the riverside. Down by the riverside. Down by the riverside, I'm gonna lay down that F-16. Down by the riverside, study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. I'm gonna lay down those cluster bombs down by the riverside. Down by the riverside. Down by the riverside, I'm gonna lay down those cluster bombs. Down by the riverside, study war no more. I'm gonna lay down those DU shells. Down by the riverside. Down by the riverside. Down by the riverside, I'm gonna lay down those DU shells. Down by the riverside, study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Last one, proxy war. I'm gonna lay down this proxy war way down. Way down. Way down. I'm gonna lay down this proxy war down by the riverside. Study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Thank you.
Bravo!
I would say there's someone who's not going to study war no more. I want to welcome our next speaker, Stephen Kinzer, who writes for the Boston Globe, if you can believe that. Stephen Kinzer is one of those few historians and journalists out there who remind us where we've come from and where we are at. He writes the stories behind the headlines, and he keeps us informed and keeps us on track. So please welcome Stephen Kinzer.
Thanks so much. It's great to be out here with you and feel like there's still some energy, and I feel like in a way things might be moving in our direction. Let me talk a little bit, just briefly today, first of all about how we got here, where we are now in the Ukraine war, and where we might be going. First of all, how did we get here? This is a war that was imposed. This war did not have to happen. There was no reason for this war. All the President of the United States had to do a couple of years ago was stand up and utter one sentence. Ukraine will not join NATO. That would have prevented this entire war. We are chewing through an entire generation of Ukrainian men in order to determine where is the border with Donbass. But for the Americans, it's about something more than that. We can hear U.S. senators cackling on the record about how wonderful this war is because so many Russians are dying and no Americans are dying. As if the Ukrainian lives are worth nothing. In 2015 and 2016, Western powers came together with Ukraine and Russia and signed what was known as the Minsk Accords. They made perfect sense. There was going to be a neutral, non-aligned Ukraine. There would be United Nations-sponsored referendums in disputed provinces. And this seemed to be a way out. So just about 6 months ago, somebody walked up to Angela Merkel, who was the German leader who signed that Minsk Accord, and said, "What happened to the Minsk Accord? Why didn't you comply?" And her answer was amazing, even to me, and I consider myself not so naive on these issues. She said, "We never intended to comply with it. It was just intended to give extra years so we could pour more weapons into Ukraine so the war would be bigger when it started." And then a reporter in France went to visit the person who was president of France at the time, Hollande, and asked him, "What did you think about what Merkel said?" And he said, "It's all true. We agreed. Let's sign this agreement, but we'll never comply with it." So even I was taken in by that one, and I can excuse for Putin for having been taken in as well. So this is a war that was brought about largely by America's innate, profound, deep need for enemies. We're always in search of enemies, and now we've got some great ones. We love to build them up and make it seem like the whole world is surrounding poor little United States, and we're always the victims. We only have to go out and defend ourselves. So this is a war that is going on mainly to satisfy the lust of people in the West, and particularly in Washington, to bleed Russia. It doesn't have anything to do with Ukraine. I can assure you that the people who are promoting this war in Washington barely can find Ukraine on a map. Ukraine doesn't interest them at all. They're just a pawn in a larger geopolitical struggle. Let me tell you, I lived in Nicaragua all during the 1980s as the New York Times correspondent there. And I watched something just like this. Nicaraguan kids killing other Nicaraguan kids in order to play out a global conflict. The people that are fomenting the conflict are not suffering. It's the kids on the ground who are dying and their families that will never again be intact. So, where are we now after we've allowed this war to explode? In Washington, the mantra of as long as it takes is still very powerful. Nonetheless, I don't think that's so true out in the general population. I feel like I've watched this movie before. I watched this movie in Vietnam, in Afghanistan, in Iraq. It always starts the same way. We are told that the entire future of human freedom on Earth hangs on victory in this war. So we get very excited, we pour a lot of money in, then people start dying in huge numbers. We begin to realize that our ally is not the golden ideal that we thought. It drags on. And then people begin to wonder in the United States, why are we pouring our treasure into foreign treasuries given all the needs that we have at home. And I think we're seeing that here in America. The last CNN poll showed that 55% of Americans oppose the provision of more weaponry to Ukraine. Now that change of opinion has not happened inside the Washington Beltway. The population is changing its mind on this issue, as well it should. Now, I want to talk about two institutions that I think have failed us, and that will bring us to the question of where we're going in the future. One is an institution that I sort of represent, and the other is an institution that you sort of represent. That is the press and the progressive anti-war movement. I think both have performed poorly. The press is in a shameful state. Only opinions and articles on one side of this issue can appear in your newspapers. No dissent in any serious way is possible in the mainstream media, and there's hardly any exception to this. I feel like I'm living in the Soviet Union when I'm reading the entire monochromatic coverage day to day about the unprovoked invasion and the brutality of the invader and the innocence of the victim. But the progressive anti-war left has also not spoken up enough on this issue. There are too many people who like to say, well, it's imperialism on the other side, and we've always been anti-imperialist. But the key here is not for us to come up with the ultimate solution to the war. The key is to end the fighting at this moment and then begin negotiations and diplomacy. That's what diplomats are for. Now, I started out by talking about Russia's motivations. And I asked my friends this question: how would we feel if Russia or China opened a military base in Tijuana and placed nuclear weapons there? This is what Russia is facing. NATO wants to build a base right on Russia's border armed with nuclear weapons. Would we say in America, well, Mexico's an independent country, even though the nuclear weapons aimed at our cities are only a few miles away from our border, we're not going to do anything? We wouldn't do that. We can't tolerate that kind of a threat on our border. So place yourself in the shoes of people on the other side and try to answer that question of how you would feel if the shoe were on the other foot. And then I ask one other question. And that question is, what is so awful about a non-aligned Ukraine? Ukraine is perfectly placed to be the bridge between East and West, rather than a piece of territory that the East and West fight over until every Ukrainian is dead. So there's actually a model for this. I want to take you back to a little historical episode, and I'll finish with this lesson. After the end of the Second World War, occupying troops did not leave Austria. Austria was occupied for 10 years after the end of the war because both sides wanted it inside their sphere of influence. That dilemma was finally solved with something called the Austrian State Treaty. Austria agreed never to join a military alliance, never to have foreign troops on its soil, and to incorporate these promises into its constitution. Austria has done great since then. It doesn't threaten anyone, and it's not threatened by anyone. This should be our model for Ukraine. I feel that the job for you, people who are active in the anti-war movement, has to be to try to educate your comrades in all of these domestic social justice movements that have sprung up over the last decade and are doing such powerful work. I admire what they're doing, but I always see a big hole in their argument. And that is, they don't make the connection between our failure to serve our own people at home and the massive amounts of money we are spending on wars abroad. What we need to do is to understand that there's an answer to that question, where are you going to get the money for that? That's what you always hear. We want Medicaid for all. Who's going to pay for it? We want free community colleges for everybody. Where are we going to get the money? Yeah, I have the money. I have $800 billion in the Pentagon. I want people working on social justice movements to make this connection so that our movement to try to end the carnage in Ukraine is understood as not simply a foreign policy project, but it's also a project aimed at turning the United States into the model that we all want it to be. It wasn't very far from this spot in 1630 when John Winthrop got up and said we wanted to be as a city upon a hill. Let us devote our efforts to transforming our society so we truly are a city upon a hill and not build bombs made to destroy hills in other countries. Thank you.
Do you think we can handle all that truthfulness at the same time?
You bet.
Next, we're going to have something a little different. I want to introduce Julia Franco, who is a sophomore at Boston College, who will make a presentation with us along with her roommate, Zoe Liu. Please welcome Julia and Zoe.
Hi there. My name is Julia. We have prepared a scene. Paul asked me, I'm very interested in theater and in acting, and oh no, you need help. So we've prepared a scene for you all today. It's a little bit different than what we've been talking about so far. It doesn't necessarily have to do immediately with ceasefire negotiation. I wanted to take this time to look at specifically what a Ukrainian is feeling and living in through this war, and try to personalize the war and try to draw some light and draw some sympathy on their experience. So thank you so much for being here. And this is dedicated to the people of Ukraine.
And wounds 8 in southern Ukraine as the war.
Ukraine surpasses Syria as country with most cluster munition casualties in the world.
Dying by the dozens every day, Ukraine loses the climb.
Ukrainian citizens recount pure horror after
Over 27
Russian
million border crossings from Ukraine recorded as of September 2023.
Russian shelling kills 6 in Gerson as Ukraine targets regions near Crimea.
Hey, what's wrong?
I can't take this anymore. I can't stop watching the news. But every time I do, I'm terrified that I'll get notifications of bodies being found on the streets. Streets I used to walk on. Do you know my elementary school was bombed the other day? Everything is torn apart. I wouldn't be able to even recognize my home.
Wow, I didn't know that was happening. I mean, I don't know what to say. I guess take a break from the media, take some time for yourself.
How can I? I feel guilty that I'm the one who's safe. My family, my friends, my people are dying or stuck or trying to get out somehow. My grandparents, they don't want to leave. Even if they did, they don't know where to go or how to get there. Their whole life is there. And they're just supposed to leave it all behind. But if they don't, they could die tomorrow. I don't know what to do. I don't know if there's anything I can do. I don't know how many more sleepless nights I can take. It's all too much. If I can't go back to the Ukraine of my childhood, walk into my grandparents' house, and hug them, a piece of me will die. And the torture is feeling like I'm nothing against it. Meanwhile, I'm here, and nobody understands. How can they? How can they relate? But when people ask if I'm fine, I'm not fine. I just don't know how to explain it.
You're right, I can't understand and I never will. But Just remember that I'm here for you and that you're not alone. Tell me, how can I support you?
I don't know. What can one person do halfway across the world that will actually make a difference? All I know is that I can't do nothing. This is such a political mess. But nobody's talking about the people. Nobody's talking about the stories of the people, my people. I just don't want people to forget that this war is about humans that are being killed, humans that are being hurt. How can I make them see that?
Look, Ukraine isn't my home, but I care about what happens to it and I care about you. Just because you're far away, it doesn't mean that you're powerless. I'm sorry, I didn't know that this is how you've been feeling lately. I'm so sorry that this is happening to you. But your story, it's meaningful and it's important and people need to hear this story. I promise, I don't know how, but we'll start somewhere. Together, we can help.
Where should we start?
Thank you so much, Julia and Zoe. And we know that you will continue on with your work of exposing the suffering that this war is causing. Our next speaker is Eileen Kirkowski, who is a leader in the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, a group that has been with us for so many years, working for peace and social justice. Eileen.
Hi, everyone. I was very, very touched by the two young women who were just here and also the journalist who is outstanding. I'm here because I'm angry. And I want to share the first message I have sent to my legislators in a very, very angry tone and hope that you all will do the same. Write angry notes. Okay. Here's the letter I sent last week. Using depleted uranium is totally unacceptable anywhere. I now seriously doubt the U.S. cares about Ukraine and its people. I don't want my taxes being used for this war the U.S. is fighting with Russia through Ukraine. Shame on us. It's long overdue to change our international relationships to non-violent cooperation. It's long overdue for our country, which was the first and only country to drop nuclear weapons on a nation, to start the process of eliminating nuclear weapons worldwide. What prompted this message was a journalist's article in the declassified UK. It was called "Contamination Fears After Ukraine Loses British Tank." And that tank was capable of firing depleted uranium shells, and that it was destroyed. And the writer Phil Miller was concerned about the health risks. My background is in health. We in the U.S. know that exposure to depleted or any uranium causes many kinds of cancers and loss of or deformed babies. To soldiers and many innocent men, women, and children. This was proven with much research done on the people in Japan, the Marshall Islands, and New Mexico, where innocent people have died from radiation. Attempts to have good independent studies of people and their environments in which depleted uranium was used in the Persian Gulf War, Bosnia, Kosovo, Afghanistan, and the Iraq War have been blocked by the nations that use DU, raising suspicions that information is being hidden. Using radioactive materials to make money and control people is detestable in my mind. As my representative, hear me roar and change your ways supporting this weapon of mass destruction. Practically all nations signed the Non-Proliferation Treaty in 1970, except for Israel. And more than 2/3 of the world supports the treaty under her prohibition of nuclear weapons of 2021. We should do so now. Sign on to and promote the Nuclear Weapons Abolition and Conversion Act, HR 2775, and write a Senate version. That's my letter. What will each of you write? Please sign our Wolf petition entitled Support an Immediate Ceasefire in Ukraine and Peace Treaty Talks. We are sending our copies to President Biden and our reps, Markey, Warren, in my case it'll be Newton's Auchincloss. Help us do this. I can make copies.
Thank you, Eileen. So that's something we can all do right now. Eileen has that petition that you can sign. The other thing is, if anyone here who supports ceasefire and negotiations has not yet filled out a postcard to those members of Congress that Eileen is talking about, please come over to this table and fill out those postcards to Warren, Markey, and your representative, all of whom stand in the way of a ceasefire and negotiations. These people are our problem, and we have to get our message to them loud and clear. Sign a postcard. Okay, our next presenters, our next performers are something you're not gonna miss. Please welcome Lucretia's Daggers.
Thanks. It's going to take us a little bit to set up because this is a band. Actually, 2/3. Unless you count the laptop, which we do. So it's 3/4 of a band. We are Lucretia's Daggers, mostly out of Watertown, a little bit out of Somerville. We are your socio-political, dark, lyrical, electro rock for the apocalypse. Exactly. Thank everybody, Ben, for doing this, all the sound, and his music. That's right. I got mine. check. Test. We're going to do New Army first. It's about climate change. We have a video for this made by an animator friend of mine. Guess we're ready. Gonna hit it. Awkward. All right, here we go.
I gave up. Yes, I guess that my best wasn't good enough. Memory, it complains that I failed to explain greater consciousness. The plan of man is not the path and it's meaningless. Yeah, the pain, it remains as a blemish to pick at and poke again. Did you dig deep enough in my fragile skin for your greedy whims? Did you find all the oil and the gas and the coal you were looking for? Did you bleed all these trees, the ice and this temperate atmosphere? Paradise incomplete before all you humans demanding more. Short-sighted, small-minded and blinded reminder that karma will get you. The poisons you posit will cough up and vomit destruction that you do. Your body, your family, your future, and sadly she will not spare you. This is your last warning, a prayer for morning in which you prepare to. Goddamn race, a disgrace. What you've done to your home, it was not your place. And the bed that you made can never be cleansed of your mortal stains. Say goodbye to your soul. All the gold cannot fill up your empty hole. When the world is no more, will you cry for your sins like a selfish whore? Short-sighted, small-minded and blinded reminder that karma will get you. The poisons you posit will cough up and vomit destruction that you do. Your body, your family, your future, and sadly she will not spare you. This is your last warning, a prayer for morning in which you prepare to die, 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 or change your mind and your motto. Get out of the gutter and tend to your mother. The flood and the fires, what from wrong desires, the earth is calling. She's calling to you, she's coming for you. What will you do? What will you choose? It is not a choice, there is no choice. This is your new army and you have been drafted. Here's your last chance.
Thank you. We have one more after they stop talking. It's called End of Oil. Wonder what that's about. It's a dancing number. This is Horace Grimsby. I'm Lucretia Ex Machina. And this guy here is Lazarus.
Loosen up a little bit, folks. Get those hips moving.
There's no more coal in the ground. We'll turn out the lights, the cars won't roll, the radios won't have sound, and we'll all bow down to the stars above us and the moon and the sun. To the wind will move us, but if we don't learn how to do it now, to change our ways, and we'll all fall down like a house of cards and be no more. The end of gold, at the end of earth, there's no more food to go around. With the war of worlds waged for space, no cash and cars will serve to fill the hole like a drop of water with the loss of seeds that would be our fodder. But if we don't learn how to do it now, to share the wealth, then we're all doomed to drown in a flood of goods and be so cold. Where are our heroes? Where are our souls? Where are our morals? Why are we closed? Where is the love now? Where is the hope? Where are our values? Why are we so fulfill our needs, a way of compassion, but a flood of grief will be in the fashion. So if we don't teach love, practice now to change our ways, then we're already done and can go back to the source from which we came.
Ukraine!
Peace in Ukraine. Thank you so much for having us. We're Lucretia's Daggers.
You want a business card? Come on up and see me.
If you want stickers, you come see me.
Yeah, so let's hear it for Lucretia's Daggers. Keep an eye out for them. They'll be performing in various venues around here. Lucretia's Daggers. Don't forget it. We're very fortunate to have a poet with us next. Just before Mark Lipman comes up, I want to remind people of two events this week. The first is that Joe Gerson, a number of you have asked for copies of his talk, or you can hear his full-length presentation this Tuesday, October 3rd, in Watertown at 7 o'clock. And Tony, I forgot the church. First Parish Church in Watertown, 7 o'clock Tuesday night. The other thing I want to mention is that Code Pink is putting on a national webinar for everyone who has been involved in this week, this mobilization week. You've been handed out leaflets about these upcoming events. You can sign up for that webinar. It will be the only time when people across the country doing these local actions will all be together to hear Cornel West and other important speakers bring us together, inspire us, and give us some good information. So that is October 3rd in the evening, but the information is on the handout that you have. And now, please welcome Mark Lipman. Mark is the founder of the Vagabond Press, the founder of the Culver City Book Festival, and he is the winner of the 2015 Joe Hill Labor Poetry Award and the 2016 International Latino Book Award. We're very fortunate to have Mark Lipman with us today. And an old friend.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Paul, and to Mass Peace Action for welcoming me here today to share some poetry with you. I'm very honored to stand with you in solidarity with 100,000 poets. So thank you very much, and I am overwhelmed by the common sense that I've been hearing here today. For too long, it's been a taboo to speak up against war because now they're run by the left. War is all of a sudden cool on the left, and if you say no to war, all of a sudden there's something wrong with you. Well, I want to tell you there's nothing wrong with you. And as a poet, as a human being, it is not my place to take sides in inter-imperialist wars, but to stand against war at all times, to always stand for peace. For in times of war and homelessness, truth is always the first victim. As the casualties pile up in our collective consciousness, memory has the lifespan of a goldfish, forgetting itself with each subsequent news cycle, spun around half lies and whole falsehoods. The politician is never too far away to pat himself on the back, taking credit for what he has never done, or at best, was forced to do, selling cheap words and platitudes to the suffering masses who must make do with unkept promises and a shrinking waistline as stretching breadlines lick an empty shelf. Compassion dies behind tall walls as those with more shorten the table to stuff their faces with the blood of the poor. For hunger is a crime in times of war and homelessness, and the refugee must take the blame for the shock and awe, for only the guilty would place their children beneath our bombs bursting in air and the rocket's red glare that is there to entertain us, to distract us from our own humanity, for having the audacity to wash up upon our shores like some dead fish with the tide, for in times of war and homelessness, with God on our side and the proper application of collective punishment, we may be blessed. The whim of a world